What's going on, everybody? We are back for Bets and Banter UFC 289 edition. We're talking Irene Aldana taking on the women's GOAT, Amanda, the Lioness Nunes. And I'm excited, guys. We got two great guests to break down the action with. So without further ado, let's bring them in. I know that we got a lot of people rocking with us live. So Gerhart from YBB, welcome back to the show. We got two friends of the show. And you're first to the air, my man. How are you, brother? It's been a long time. How you been? And how's YBB?
YBB is doing good. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate you reaching out to me. We've done a couple of shows together and we discuss MMA all the time. So I'm glad to break down this card with you, and hopefully talking out loud, I'm able to find some more positions that I like on this card. So I can't wait, man.
Absolutely. Nothing better than when you can meld minds with some of the other people out there that are trying to break this down in a data-oriented way. I know that that's what you do. And my man, James, one of the sharpest cappers out there, long-term third-party tracked record, Lucrative MMA, AKA. Welcome back, James. Friend of the show. Great to have you back, my brother. How have you been?
Yeah, I've been doing very well, brother. Just trying to catch these bets every single weekend. Obviously, I took a big bath last weekend, so I'm ready to hop back in the game and come back with another win. And Gerhart is right, when he says that when you speak about these fights out loud, oftentimes you can fall on certain positions that you weren't really thinking of. You can kind of convince yourself, and especially speaking with two of you sharp guys, I'm sure that that will happen to me as well. So thanks for having me on as always, bro. And I'm looking forward to doing this show.
Absolutely. Couldn't have said it any better. So, gentlemen, we got a lot of great fights, 11 to break down at UFC 289. And we will start with the women's division. We've got a 115-pound pairing between Diana Belbita, the honorary Canadian here, taking on Maria Spider-Girl Oliveira. And one of the things I like to do as I'm breaking down these fights, as I'm breaking down the footage, is then I go over and I check what's this person been up to lately. I check their social media. I try and get a beat on what they're doing. And Maria Oliveira is on a Brazilian reality TV show. It's in her bio. You go look it up. It's very popular in Brazil. So I'm sure she's, building a nice life for herself outside of fighting. But she's 26 years of age and she's worked with Perane Vale Tudo for 6 years, purple belt under that gym. You'd never know it by watching her fight. She doesn't look to be the most proficient offensive grappler. She's given up 10 takedowns, I believe it is, in 4 UFC fights. Pretty concerning. And you look at some of the girls she's fought, very, very small girls. And so I think that when she's met girls that have length that can match her in some of those categories, it's given her problems. Against Marina Rodriguez, caused her to quit in the first round. Against Gloria De Paula, caused her to fight to a very close decision where she absorbed 100 significant strikes. So I think Diana Belbita never gone under 87 significant strikes in a fight that went 15 minutes in the UFC. She's not great. She's not a prize, but I think she might have wrestling upside, believe it or not, in this matchup. And I also think that on the feet, she's a little bit more reliable to throw volume. And I think she's a little bit more aggressive. She's got the home crowd probably going to be behind her. She's got a pretty big social media following herself, very publicly liked fighter. So I think that she is the side in this matchup. That's the side I'd be looking towards, but no bets on this fight for me yet. James, what do you got, my man?
Yeah, I'm on the same side in terms of who I think is going to win, Diana Belbita. I was surprised it was lined this closely. I know it's women's MMA, but I did think they'll open by Belbita, or at least she would be bet down to a slight favorite. I haven't checked it this morning. It's New Zealand, Auckland morning time here, so maybe she has gone to a slight favorite. I know she was teetering around that minus 120 range, but I think she should be a little bit higher, Diana Belbita. I mean, she seems like the crisper striker of the two, and just the more reliable, in my opinion. Maria Oliveira likes to throw wide shots. She'll throw 7, 8 punch combinations where they don't really hit home. Maybe she'll land 1 or 2. She does pack some power. Obviously, if she's just swinging massive bombs like that, oftentimes if they do land, they are going to hurt you. But on the other hand, Diana Belbita has some good power as well. We saw that in her fight with Hannah Goldie. I thought that was on its way to being a first-round TKO. Obviously, Goldie's a pretty tough girl, so she was able to survive. And in this fight, I just like the fighter who, in my opinion, is a little bit of a level above in terms of the striking, in terms of the technique. And as you say, if it does come down to the wrestling, I don't think Belbita will shoot too often, but if she does, that's definitely a path open there for her. And when you mix in Maria's lack of defensive skills in the striking, I think Belbita has a good chance to crack her on the chin and honestly hurt her in the spot. And I wouldn't be surprised if she drops her. potentially even finishes her. You know, I am predicting Diana Belbita to win by decision, but I wouldn't be shocked if she hurts her or even finishes her. So I'll go with Diana Belbita, and I do think there's some value on the line at the moment.
Yeah, I think when you're getting dropped by Vanessa Demopoulos, you can never rule out that you could get hurt or finished by somebody like Diana Belbita, who's a little bit longer, has better, just tools in terms of trying to land a piston-like strike. You know, you can't really do that when you're built like Vanessa Demopoulos. She can only throw the winging shots with power, but I feel like Diana Belbita puts a little bit more sting on her shots. So I think that this is a fight where leaning that way, and I was on Lou's show earlier, I had to come up with some long shot props. I feel like it's a tougher card for props this week. But one of the ones I came up with, James, was KO for Belbita plus 800. I thought to myself, it's just a little wide when you're going to land such a large quantity of strikes. So I'm completely aligned with you there. Gerhart, what do you think about this fight? You think we're out to lunch? Do you like Spider Girl here? Or are you agreeing with us on the Belbita side? Excuse me.
So yeah, this is exactly why I wanted to talk some of the fights out loud, because this is the one where initially I'm thinking this has split decision written all over it. And I thought that because I was thinking it's going to be moment winning versus minute winning. And I do actually agree with you. I think Belbita will have the grappling upside, or at least the cage and clinch control upside. I think she's going to be the stronger girl. She's probably going to have the strength advantage. But Oliveira does have some flashy techniques at times. Pretty low IQ. It's a low level, high variance fight to start the card. So really anything can happen. I mean, I kind of agree with both of you guys that Belbita will probably get her hand raised, but she's also been one of the girls that I've had a tough read on as a favorite, at least. There's certain fighters where when they're priced as a favorite, like Kim, Jung Young Kim, they don't come through for you. So I don't know. This is one of those spots. However, you are getting a more generous price tag to her name. For me, I mean, I think more so a split decision, but hearing it out loud, I kind of can see a little bit of merit for Belbita getting it done inside the distance. But yeah, overall, that is my prediction. I'm going to be siding with Belbita in this spot.
So the last thing I'll add on this fight is just that we are going to be in Canada, right? The local fighter in this market is Diana Belbita. And so if we were to see some hometown cooking, I think it's going to favor Belbita, plus the potential for finishing upside. That's what I like on her side. But we got some sharp people in the chat. My guy WW says he likes Oliveira's energy, thinks she's going to land the KO. The one thing I'll note is both these women absorb a lot of strikes. So in a WMMA fight, it's probably heavily favored to go to decision. I'd be curious what the ends by KO is as well. Could be a really wide number. And when both people are going to land 90 significant strikes in a decision, those are the kind of fights that could be sneaky upside for a knockout. But with that being said, we can move to the next fight here. We're going to go up 10 pounds in the men's division, 125 pounds here. David Dvorak taking on Steve Erceg. I've heard it pronounced a couple different ways. James, I'm sure you have a definitive answer on that one, being he's from your current neck of the woods. But in terms of this fight, man, I think Erceg is not a guy. Erceg, I don't know what I'm going to go with. I think Erceg. It looks like Erceg to me. But as far as I'm concerned, he's a guy that comes in and brings some, UFC ready attributes. He seems like a tough guy. I watched the fight that he lost. He gave up some positions. It didn't go his way, but he stayed in it. He seemed to win some positions, some, potentially a whole round there. I think he lost 29-28. So as far as I'm concerned, he's a gamer. He wants to fight. He's tough. He wants to be in there. He's been preparing for a UFC opportunity. So, when they open this really wide, it's a flyweight fight. There's some potential for a finish, but Dvorak hasn't shown himself to be extremely lethal since he came to the UFC, picks his shots, been willing to fight to decision with some guys, fight within the margins a little bit. And then on the other side, he's actually been getting dropped in some of his recent fights. Mildly concerning. So Erceg seems like a guy who's going to bring the pressure on the feet, going to try and get a hold of you, bring it to the ground. Seems like he could fight at a really dynamic flyweight pace, whereas Dvorak, he's kind of been taking a little bit off of his pace down the stretch in these fights. Seems like he's a little bit nervous about getting hurt, about getting into prolonged exchanges. So I think if he's able to dictate the range of this fight, keep it on the outside, or be in the top position the whole time, that could be a recipe for success, for Dvorak. But on the other side, I don't think Erceg is out to lunch here. I think he's got a good chance to win. I think he's going to bring pressure, pace. He's the guy who's got momentum right now, and he's been preparing, whereas Dvorak's trying to find his footing. He's trying to get back on track after suffering two really, confidence-shaking defeats, in my view. So he's shown good toughness, good heart, hasn't quit on you. but he's not coming through either. So I think that, he hasn't beaten anybody in the UFC that makes me think, oh my God, this guy's special. And his losses showed me he's tough. He can hang with these guys, but can he beat them? I didn't see any signs of that either. So Gerhart, we'll kick this one off to you, brother. What do you think?
This is going to be my first dog shot of the night. I'm actually going to be on Erceg as well. Dvorak, for me, it's more of he's kind of a finished product. And right now, in order to back him, you're paying a premium to back Dvorak. He's well-rounded. He has good striking. He circles the cage. He's decent, but you know what he's going to bring to the table. Whereas Erceg, I think he has upside. I do still price him as the dog, but I do think the line is a little wide. I do think he should be closer to plus 150-ish, if I'm being honest, because he will bring the fight. Not only that, but my biggest concern for him is that he is quite hittable. If you watch some of his tape, he can get tagged up, but it almost seems like he can flourish in those chaotic scenarios. And I just don't know that Dvorak can. I take that back. He can. He did it very well against Manel Kape. But I just think that the number itself is just a little too wide for my liking. Erceg, the concerns for me is that he really, in this spot, he just has average top control. So if he does get this fight down, I don't rate his top control, too significantly. His back takes, his transitions, they're nice. You know what he's looking to do. He does want to grapple. It's just a matter of getting it there. I do think he's going to get tagged up on the feet. But it's the pricing for me. I think the pricing is just a little too wide. I want my minus 300 favorites to get it done inside the distance. And I'm not, predicting that for Dvorak. I could be wrong, but again, it's a numbers game for me. I'm going to be taking a shot on Erceg here. And honestly, I don't think he has anything to lose on short notice. If he loses this fight, there's UFC 294 in Australia coming back. I'm sure they'll throw him right back on the card again. So this is a prospect that the UFC has been wanting to bring in for some time. So for all those reasons, yeah, it's a dog or pass, and I'll take the dog.
I like where your head's at, man. We've seen a big correction already. I was disgusted with myself that I didn't get in when it was above plus 300. So now I'm in a little bit of a tough position where I feel like if I was to be on a side, I'd be on the Erceg side here. But I'm also waiting to see what happens with this line because it's come in so considerably that I would not be surprised if we saw some resistance come in the other way, or if people look and see Dvorak's a name I recognize, maybe Erceg's a name I don't recognize, so they click him in their parlays this week. And so I would not be surprised if this number ends up bumping back up a little bit on the Erceg side before fight time. James, what do you make of this fight? What do you make of the UFC newcomer here? And do you think he's live?
I definitely think he's live, and I'm going to make it a trio and say that Erceg is definitely the side here. If you're gonna lay any money, I wouldn't be laying minus 300 on David Dvorak, But I don't want to repeat the points that you guys have already spoke about, so I'll try and give a little bit of a different spin on it, right? So I made a video on my YouTube channel about a month or two ago, and I mentioned that betting on UFC debutants is usually risky business, right? Oftentimes when they come in and make their UFC debut, they don't perform to where they actually are. They don't perform to their level. There's many reasons for that. I won't go in depth on the reasons, but it's funny because as you guys know, MMA betting is a contradictory game, right? So in the same breath that you have to be worried about betting on UFC debutants, oftentimes they're undervalued because they are debutants. And I think that's what's happening here because Steve Erceg to me looks like a good grinder. He looks like someone who does potentially gas. He seemed like he gassed in that Cody Hatton fight, but he won a decision there. He stayed tough. He came back. He had a good third round, and he won that decision there. So even though maybe he is a bit of a gasser, I think he can push the pace, come through, and in a grinding type of fare that he will want to bring with the wrestling, with the double legs, I think he's the one going to be fighting for your money. And I agree. I think plus 150, like Gerhart said, is about correct. Is about where I would line it. So for me, plus 235, where he's at the moment, it's a good bet. In terms of the stylistics between the two, I think he's going to be pushing the pace more. I think he's going to be doing a little bit more. Maybe Dvorak is just too much of a step up. But Steve Erceg, if he takes the back, I think he can be dangerous. I think he can finish Dvorak. I know Dvorak stayed tough in that Manel Kape fight. It looked like he could have tapped a couple of times, but I do think this is a bit of a different fight. I don't think he's going to be going for arm bars and stuff. I think he'll be trying to get a choke in. And as you know very well, Liam, chokes are a bit different than arm bars. You might be able to tough out an arm bar or something like that, but you can't really tough out a choke. You can. We saw my boy Kai Kara do it last week, but, You know what I'm saying? So I think that if he wraps up a rear naked, it could be game over. And I just like the plus 235 value on Erceg. So I'm going to pick him for this fight.
One of my absolute favorite points, and something that people don't take seriously enough with the grappling. You know, there are tough guys out there that'll let something break. That will John Jones versus Vitor Belfort comes to mind, right? He sold out, tried to break John's arm. He extended the ligaments. Most people tap there, right? It's a damaging hold. John says, no, give me the damage. I'm going to get you back. Like, there's some guys that are wired differently. A tough guy, you can be as tough as you want. You go to sleep in a choke, right? Unless you grab the finger and do something crazy to pull yourself out. I just felt like Kai Kara-France showed a lot of heart and toughness last week. But Albazi had him in all sorts of dangerous positions. I like someone that pursues the choke, and I think we got a live underdog on our hands. So hopefully we get to see plus 250, plus 300 come back on the board. Hopefully the parlay love comes in. I think we got a lot of parlayable lines for the general public this week. Not a huge offering on pay-per-view. So I think they're going to see a lot of big favorites and say, all right, who's my 3 or 4 favorites? I'm going to go with those. And when you see a big line on David Dvorak, you might say to yourself, oh, this is one to take. And I think we're all advising you try and maybe be cautious about doing that, because it's a dangerous spot, and you don't normally see people priced as a 3-1 favorite coming off of 2 straight losses. So with that being said, we can move to the next fight on the card, and our next Canadian representative is the monster, Kyle Nelson, coming back at 145 pounds, fresh off a draw with the Korean Superboy, Doo Ho Choi, with some controversy to follow. And he's taking on Blake Bilder in this spot. And Blake Bilder comes in from CFFC, Beast Coast, stand-up, one of the toughest regional scenes in the United States. But it's not like he came out of there unscathed, right? It's not like Blake Bilder came out of there looking like aces. He came out of there with a good skill set, with some passable striking, with some good grappling on the ground, but his chin seems like a liability to me. You know, I think the thing that's kept him going is his cardio and his athleticism edge over a lot of his opponents. And I'm not sure that that's going to be as present in this fight. You know, Kyle Nelson, say a lot of bad things about Kyle Nelson. He's a little bit gassy, hasn't always made the best decisions in the octagon, but he's fought tough with a lot of tough fighters. He's won 4-1 in the UFC. Hardly been able to buy a win, but if there was ever a time, it's in Canada where they could definitely give him a little bit of nudge decision if he's able to keep it close. And I think on top of that, Kyle Nelson at plus 1150 to win by knockout in round 1 just feels wide to me, given that's his primary win condition here. When you look at Kyle Nelson, he comes out swinging big. He likes to go after it with heavy power shots, and that normally leaves him gassed in round 2 and 3. Blake Bilder could definitely take over if the fight gets there, but I've seen this guy drop by lower level fighters than Kyle Nelson. So I'm not going to be parlaying Blake Bilder either at a minus 250 price tag in his second UFC fight. That's not for me. So Gerhart, what do you think about this one, man?
Yeah, see, I'm actually right there with you. And in my notes, I've been saying that Blake Bilder has been outperforming his market expectations. He was a dog against Shane, he wins. He was a dog against Morgan, he wins. He was a dog against Eddie Torres, he wins. Now he's a massive favorite against a guy who actually has UFC experience. And I agree with you. Say whatever you want about Kyle Nelson, but I don't like backing guys who have a path to victory and who are borderline about to get cut. And I think that's the scenario that we're set up with Kyle Nelson. Kyle Nelson, in my opinion, should still be the underdog. But, man, you're paying a premium to back the favorite. So, again, it's a pricing thing for me. I like Kyle Nelson. He's a good Canadian kickboxer. Or I won't say good, but I will say he does pack power. And he knows how to win these fights. And if you're on a 4-fight skid and you're borderline about to get your walking papers, even if you win a boring decision, you can still get your walking papers. I think that he has to put on a show, and I think he knows what he needs to do. And I think he's going to put the pace on Blake Bilder. I'm tempted in taking a shot. I don't like that at my book right now. It's at plus 195. That makes me hesitate a little bit. I would like to be greedy. Give me something above plus 200. I'll entertain Kyle Nelson maybe in the first 2 rounds. I just think Blake Bilder, again, he's just outperforming his market. And now you're paying a tax to back him. I think he's a good fighter. I also think he's undersized, though. I think he's just kind of tiny. Kyle Nelson's a guy who has actually fought at lightweight before. He has good entries, okay top time. He will have the upside of momentum, but again, it's a numbers game. I do think Nelson does have a path to victory. Hometown, I don't know. There's just things to like about on the Nelson side. There's also things to like about Bilder. If you're in the game of going with the upside of momentum, that's probably your guy. But if you look at price tags like myself, I'm just not a fan of the price. That's all.
You're looking at two guys that are the same age as well. You know, it's not like he's the fresh young guy from the region. It's like, no, these guys are the same age. And Kyle Nelson's been doing it at a higher level. So I definitely think Bilder probably projects a little bit higher than Kyle Nelson. He's got more skills to build around, but who's more game and ready right now? Open question in my mind. What do you think, James?
Yeah, I think this is a weird one for me. This is a fight I really do not like. You know, every single week I speak to multiple sharp people about who they think's going to win. And, you know, we go back and forth, as I'm sure both of you guys do too. And I just feel like this could be one of those weeks where Carl Nelson gets it done and just no one expects it. You know, most of the time, there's a good amount of money on these underdogs that get it done, right? At least most of the time. So, like, a lot of people are going to be on Steven Erceg this week, right? Or I don't remember what it was last week, but a lot of people were on Damon Blackshear, for example, as an underdog, right? I just feel like no one's going to be on Carl Nelson here. I don't know if I'm correct. You know, I haven't really listened to any podcasts or anything, but maybe I'm incorrect. But Carl Nelson has a terrible UFC record. He doesn't really do anything in his fights, especially recently. It looks like he's just scared in the fights. And he's just not a very good fighter. So I feel like no one's going to back him. And I feel like he could be the one that just wins as like a plus 300 underdog. And the reason I say that is because, like Gerhart said, I don't think Blake Bilder's as good as maybe his recent record has shown. I mean, the guy I think he's undefeated, right? The guy's okay, yeah. So he's got one, whatever you call that, one split decision draw, right? He's undefeated, right? But when you look at him, he doesn't look like this great undefeated fighter. He's undefeated who's got 2 wins under the UFC banner, right? Obviously, the first fight was in the Contender Series. I actually backed him as an underdog there. In the Shane Young fight, I took a pass. But I think at some point, the fade is going to come for sure. And it might be when we're least expecting it. He gets hit a lot. He gets hurt a lot. It hasn't come in his recent fights. But, I mean, we all know if you go back and watch his regional scene fights, the guy's getting dropped left, right, and center. He's obviously an absolute dog, great recoverability, comes back to get finishes, let alone just win the fight. But I don't know if Carl Nelson cracks him and drops him, it's probably going to be the hardest puncher he's ever fought. And I don't think he's coming back from that, you know. So like you said, Carl Nelson to win by knockout in round 1 is a decent play. I'm going to say that there is some value on Carl Nelson. I'm not going to say he's more proven, but he's at least got more experience. He's fighting for his job here. So oftentimes that bumps them up another 5% or something. He can't afford to lose here. Otherwise, he's most certainly going to get cut. And at some point, I think Blake Bilder's going to be found out, man. I think he's going to be completely exposed. So I'm going to say Carl Nelson gets it done. But, you know, contrarily, I understand that Carl Nelson probably should be a bit of an underdog here. But I don't know, man. I think he can pull it out of the bag. So KO in round 1 is a decent shot. Even the money line is a decent shot. I don't think Blake Bilder should be minus 300.
I'm with you. And I just think when you're looking at somebody like Kyle Nelson, he's a prototypical guy that will go underrated. And, you know, if he loses here, all right, he gets cut from and he's gone. But you know you're going to get his best. You know you're going to get full effort from him. He's got multiple teammates fighting on the card. He's in his own backyard fighting in Canada. And the one other thing I want to point out is Blake Bilder did some fighting in the Apex. Now he's got to go fight in front of a big crowd that's going to be quite hostile towards him. I think that's something to bear in mind here. You could see a different reaction from people when they're faced with that kind of adversity. So if you got a big, scary guy coming at you, Kyle Nelson used to fight at 55 and he was a little bit undersized. Now he's at 45 and he's huge. He says there's not many featherweights that have my muscle mass, and I agree with him. So just something to bear in mind here is that Kyle Nelson, he could look heavier on top than you expect, and he could hit harder on the feet than you expect. But I do think his best path, keep it on the feet, try and sprawl, brawl, and knock this guy the hell out. So let's go Kyle Nelson. Next up, Aiemann Zahabi, TriStar MMA zone, taking on Aoriqileng at 135 pounds here. So a lot of lightweight fights to kick us off on this card. And this is a fight where you got a former flyweight in Aoriqileng. He moved up to 135. He looks more muscular, looks a little bit better, looks like he's healthier coming into these fights. Probably a good sign for him. Aiemann Zahabi, on the other hand, last fight out, I was very proud of it. I took a shot on Aiemann Zahabi as a dog. I thought people were a little bit too high on Ricky Tercios. He had been fighting green fighters. He had been doing very good in those fights, but Aiemann Zahabi's been around a long time. He sparred a lot of really good guys. I just felt like that wasn't going to intimidate him, the fact that he was coming off the Ultimate Fighter. And Ricky's not the most lethal guy. He could break you on cardio, but he's really not hurting many guys on the feet cleanly. So I felt like that was a good spot for him. In this fight, I don't really love it as much because he's a very low volume guy. He's not a guy that typically goes out there and tries to implement a wrestling or grappling heavy game plan. He's not a very active UFC fighter. And so I initially felt like there was some value. You know, I think he was plus 130. I first looked on Sunday, plus 145. I was like, oh, you know what? Maybe I could get to the Zahabi side. You know, he's perpetually underrated guy. No. The market's coming in on him. It's like a pick 'em price now. And at that point, you've got a guy who's 6 years younger on the other side. He's training with good people. He's at a weight class that's probably more optimal for him now. And he's fighting a guy who's 35 at 135. How long does that work out for most people? Not very long. So I think that this is actually like a step up in competition for Zahabi from Tercios ever so slightly. You know, I feel like in terms of the lethality, especially coming back at him, and that's the problem for Zahabi. He doesn't have bad skills, but he just is a little bit tentative with his offense because he's been knocked out in the UFC. And I don't think he wants to get knocked out again, which is why he's such a neutral fighter now. Either way, I don't like it. At a slight chalk price for Zahabi now, I would not lay it. I think that it's probably the younger, you know, I think you'd call him a slight favorite still at most books, but you know, Aoriqileng's probably going to flip to a dog here if the pace at which money comes in on Zahabi continues. So for me, it's a little bit now of name hype on Zahabi. And I don't know that people watched his fights where he's not altogether that impressive. You know, he's normally not a knockout threat, but he's a good fight manager. You know, if you don't bring a really intense pace, he could just try and pick his spots, move on the outside and just outpoint you a little bit. So I think he's a little bit more of a point fighter. And I think that knockout that he got over Draco Rodriguez was more of an accident than anything. James, what do you think about this fight? And do you have any strong reads?
Yeah, fairly strong. I like Aoriqileng in this spot. I love Aoriqileng in general because I cashed one of my biggest bets ever, him versus Cameron Else. I must have bet on around 20 different bookmakers that the fight wouldn't go to decision. The under 1.5, the under 2.5, Aoriqileng by KO, round 1, round 2. I literally unloaded on about 20 different bookmakers. I called up people in different countries to tell them to bet on those spots in their bookmakers. So we made a lot of money on Aoriqileng versus Cameron Else. So I'm going to love him forever for that. There's a few fighters in the sport that have made me a lot of money, and I'll always love them forever for that. And in this spot, I don't think I'm being swayed by that. I do think that he's the deserved favorite here, even though he's not a favorite. I know the money's coming back in on him now. I just feel like Zahabi is such a low volume striker that it's very, very hard to back him in any spot just because his ceiling, right? That's what we like to say in MMA gambling, yeah? His ceiling is pretty low in any spot just because he's never going to run away with it. Yeah, he might get a KO like he did against, I think it was Draco, right? But I mean, that's unlikely in my opinion. I don't think he's a very hard striker. I just think he's pretty technical and he throws good straight shots. But I'm just watching the PFL. I just cashed my bet as well. Shout out to anybody watching the PFL. Oh, Perganda's about to get a first round stoppage there. Let's go. I got the under 2.5 there. Oh, damn, they didn't stop it. Jesus Christ. But yeah, back to this fight. Aoriqileng, man, I think he's going to win the fight. He's obviously shown a lot of growth in his career, right? So if you go back and watch some of these regional scene fights, he wasn't doing that well. I mean, I think he lost against like a 3-3 guy, which didn't look very good, right? But since he's come into the UFC, I think he's looked a lot better. I mean, that fight against Cody Durden, he did fairly well against a good fighter in Cody Durden. We've seen Cody Durden go on to do decent things in the UFC. And then in his last fight against Jay Perrin, I know Jay Perrin's not a great fighter. I think he may be cut now, potentially. But I think he showed very good growth in that fight. You know, like Aoriqileng, we know him for being a brawler who's fairly reckless, just throwing shots from all angles. But in that fight, he was bouncing in and out of range. He was shifting his stance a little bit. He looked like an improved fighter in my eyes, for sure. And he's coming up against a guy in Aiemann Zahabi, who's 35 years old. I don't think Zahabi's going to be improving anytime soon. And it's just, for me, the final nail in the coffin is just like, Aoriqileng's just going to do more, man. Maybe it just turns out that his brawling style hasn't grown enough to where Zahabi's just a cleaner and technical striker and he can out-kickbox him, but I don't think so. This is a mixed martial arts fight. I think Aoriqi's going to be going forward, landing heavier shots. And so, exclusive to every viewer here, I have took a shot on Aoriqileng. The market came down. It went to a pick'em. I jumped on that straight away. I think he should be at least 60% favorite here. So I'm going with Aoriqileng once again.
I like it. Fair play. Gerhart, do you agree with us or do you disagree here? I think Zahabi, again, I understood the love at early prices at the early plus money, but, I can't really see favoring him here. I feel like he's an underdog only kind of bet. What do you think?
I think you guys probably are a little bit more confident in this fight than I am. Initially, I was actually leaning more towards the Zahabi side. But I do think that it's a benefit for this fight to be taking place at bantamweight. He's going to have that bantamweight benefit for Aoriqileng. He won't have to cut that 10 extra pounds. So that's a benefit for him. He's a fighter, in my opinion, who thrives in chaos. He has good power. He stalks his opponents. The thing is Zahabi, he's been kind of a weird read for me. He's been living off of the brother's name in Faraz, and he has a little bit less mileage, but he does seem clean. He seems technical. He seems like a smart and high IQ fighter, I would say. Just not as athletic as some of his opponents. Tough fight to break down. I think that you guys will probably have a little bit better of a read in this spot, but my initial prediction was Zahabi to get it done by decision. This is not a fight I'm betting, though, so I want to make that very clear.
Yeah, and the one thing I will mention here on the way out as well is that we are thinking about this fight, in terms of maybe some finishing potential and definitely some potential volume upside on Aoriqileng. However, Canadian judges will do whatever they want to do if this makes it to the scorecard. So that's one thing to just be a touch weary of. Not from the same side of Canada. We're not in the French-speaking part of Canada, all these kind of things from a geography standpoint that most people haven't tapped into. But Zahabi still is a Canadian fighting in Canada. So just one thing to be a little bit weary of. The crowd will probably be bigly backing him, but something to keep in mind. Next up, we've got another Canadian, Jasmine Jasudavicious, and we're back in the flyweight division. She's taking on Miranda Maverick from the great United States of America. This is a interesting fight here because Miranda Maverick, I feel like, let me down just a touch in the Shanny Young fight. She's been a money printing factory for me. James was talking about Aoriqileng being a fighter that's made him a lot of money. Miranda Maverick's been a fighter that's made me a bunch of money against. I've just had a good read on her. I bet against her with Macy Barber. We got a little lucky there, but it's also when you're betting plus money on split decisions in WMMA, that's when you're trying to check that box, right? It's close fights. That's what you're hoping for. Then similarly, I bet Erin Blanchfield, right? New York, New Jersey in the building, Beast Coast stand up. But then I started to get back on the Maverick train and people were undervaluing her against the Sabina Mazos of the division where she's able to go out there and get the finish, get the sub prop at plus 300, I think it was. So overall, I think Miranda Maverick's been very good. But when she's not able to exert a lot of physical advantages, then it becomes a lot more of a close fight, And I think one of the things that she did well was she dealt with Sabina Mazo's length, but Sabina Mazo, not very high level, right? I think that this is where she's going to have to deal with somebody who's a little bit longer, a little bit more well-versed in the clinch as well. And in the wrestling, I don't think it's going to be easy for Maverick to necessarily get takedowns in this fight. So for me, it makes Jasudavicious a somewhat interesting dog because I've been talking about the Canadian rig show angle, which is definitely in play, right? Some place around the world, you feel like you get a fair shake. Canada isn't always one of them, okay? So I just think people in Canada, in Britain, some places you got to be a little aware. Sometimes they give it to the home fighter, okay? If you have a fight that's going to go to decision, and I'm not saying this is definitively, but it's favored to go to decision, and Maverick didn't go out there and finish Shanna Young like she did the first time, right? So I think against a tough girl like Jasudavicious, who's proven to be difficult to finish in her losses, I think she's a live underdog in this spot, but haven't gotten there because Miranda Maverick to me is a little bit better of a fighter. She's much younger in the spot. She's a little bit more marketable, but again, the hometown edge is real, and Miranda Maverick could easily be rebuilt. Jasmine Jasudavicious is all in. She needs to win these kind of fights to progress her career if she ever wants to fight for a title. And you go back and look, her record's worse than it should be, in my opinion. I thought she beat Elise Reed back in the day and didn't get that decision. It was a close nod win against her. But she proved she's tough as a dog against Natalia Silva. So you're telling me she's easily going to get washed here against Maverick? I'm not quite sure about that. So Maverick's definitely my girl. Going to be rooting for her forever, but I think this is a tough enough fight that I'm not going to be laying the minus 2XX and beyond on the Maverick side. You're even seeing 3XX in some books, and that's just not for me. James, what do you think about this one, my man?
Yeah, just like you said, Maverick is my girl as well. I had about 30K on her to beat Sabina Mazo and quite a bit more on the subline as well. And I remember she cashed both of those for me. which was a good bet. And I actually sent some money to her. She had a couple GoFundMes up. So that was definitely a good part of my betting career last year. And so just like you, she's always going to be a favorite of mine, right? Like I said, with Aoriqileng, these fighters who have won me a lot of money, there's something special about them going forward, right? And you have to make sure that that doesn't bleed in to your betting process when they fight in their next fight. And I have to do that to a lot of fighters because I've been gambling for a lot of time. So there's a lot of fighters who have helped me. One of those is Dariush, and we'll speak about him later. I've won a lot of money on Dariush. So every time Dariush fights, I just want to bet him because he's won me so much money. And in this spot, instantly I saw it and I was like, okay, I heard it was announced and I was like, I'll probably bet Maverick there, right? We'll see what the line is. I thought they would line Maverick like minus 170 or something. And then she comes out and she's like minus 300, minus 350. And I just look at it like, Jesus Christ, man. At the end of the day, this is probably going to be a close fight. Like I would be quite surprised if Maverick just steamrolls her 30-27. She could win 30-27, but I think some of the moments in the fight will be close. I think this fight really comes down to the grappling exchanges. You know, obviously Miranda Maverick is a little bit better of a striker, but she does get caught. You know, she does get tagged up. I remember she fought Liana Jojua and she was tagging her up on the feet, bouncing in and out of range. She looked really good, but she was actually getting caught a couple of times in that spot as well. And so, you know, these margins are thin where someone gets hit, they might get wobbled for a second. I remember Sabina Marzo was kind of tagging her up on the feet a little bit. Obviously, Marzo's a better striker than Jasmine Jasudavicious, but I think the striking is probably going to be fairly close, although I definitely lean Maverick there. But the grappling is where this fight is interesting to me because I feel like any fighter can get the other fighter down. I wouldn't be surprised if Jasmine gets a takedown at all. I wouldn't be surprised if Marzo gets a takedown. But I think Jasmine has very good takedown defense. You know, I know she got taken down a couple of times, got taken down by, I think it was Kay Hansen. Shout out to her because I cashed her as a plus 200 there. But I just feel like whoever gets takedowns is probably going to win the fight. And I have no confidence that Maverick's going to get takedowns at a minus 350 price range. So for me, I love Jasmine in this spot. Plus 250 is good for me. I've bet it myself. I just don't understand why this line is so wide, man. At the end of the day, I think most people agree it's going to be a fairly close fight. And specific moments, whoever gets the takedown first could swing the fight. So for that reason, plus 250 is an easy bet for me.
I love it. We got a lot of sharp people in the chat rocking with us. My guy, Dan Hamilton, frequent commenter, appreciate you being here, says he took Jasmine plus 260 and the plus 3.5 spread. And it seems like that's a consensus play. A lot of people liking the spread here. My guy, J. Cole MMA says Jasmine plus 3.5 at plus money is a solid spot. Like where your head's at. So shout out to everybody rocking with us in the chat. Appreciate each and every one of you guys. Drop a like on the video if you haven't already. Make sure you get subscribed to the channel if you like talking fights, because that's what we do each and every week on this show. And without further ado, let's hear from Gerhart on this fight. My man, are you liking another dog here? Are you riding with the favorite Miranda Maverick? What are you thinking about this one?
Yeah, we're talking price tags, and I'm going to make it 3 for 3. Jasmine, so I priced her here at plus 140. I'm looking at my notes right now, and I have Maverick as minus 200. I think paying that premium minus 300, once again, I want my minus 300s to get that fight done inside the distance. And I don't know that Miranda Maverick has a lot of finishing upside. Submission, maybe, but this is a girl who does not look good off of her back. I think Jasmine lands one, that's the round. Miranda Maverick does not do very well off of her back. She will probably have the striking advantage. The strength advantage, that remains to be seen, but I do think that it probably favors Jasmine, to be honest. And then, let's talk about that Natalia Silva fight. I was watching an interview where she mentioned that she wasn't really expecting Silva to be as quick as she was. And that was Silva's first fight back in like 2 years. I don't think anybody expected Silva to be like that. She just overperformed her market number. And if you look at the numbers next to Jasmine Jasudavicious' name, oh, wow, I like that. Fuck them favorites. That's right. Fuck them favorites. So, I like Jasmine in this spot, just given the number. Again, you look at some of her fights, she was actually favored to beat Natalia Silva. So that just says where the market is on or what they think of her as an overall fighter. And then, the next fight, she goes out there, wins. She's back on track. And now, she's just way too big of an underdog for my liking. So I think the stab is worth it. So yeah, I'm going to align with you guys. I'm going to say that there's more value on the underdog than there is a favorite. And I will be betting that for 3/4 unit. So
I'll just jump in quickly, if you don't mind, Liam, because, you know, Gerhart mentioned that she was plus 200 or she was minus 200 against Natalia Silva. And we have to, look, anybody watching now, we have to make the bookies pay. I don't think MMA is going to be this. I don't think the MMA markets are going to be this easily infiltrated by the gambler in 5 to 10 years. I don't think it's going to be this easy, because if we just look at Jasmine Jasudavicious, right? She was plus 200 against Kay Hansen in an absolute insane line, right? And then she won that fight, and then they put her at minus 300 against Natalia Silva. An absolute insane line. The jumps from fight to fight in MMA are massive. Recency bias in MMA are massive. We have to cash now. We have to put our chips in and make as much money now, because I know for a fact if I was an odds maker, I wouldn't be making her minus 200, minus 300, and then plus 200, because I bet on the other girl, right? So at some point in time, MMA gambling's getting bigger. There's going to be more people like us three watching the sport. There's going to be more people like us three as an odds maker, and we ain't going to be able to get these lines. So let's cash ASAP. I'm not saying Jasmine Jasudavicious is a lock at plus 250. What I am saying is it's a stupid line, just like her previous fights. They keep lining Jasmine Jasudavicious wrong. She shouldn't have been minus 300 against Natalia. She shouldn't have been plus 200 against Kay Hansen. And she shouldn't be plus 250 against Miranda Maverick.
I totally agree. I think that one of the things that gets lost the most is just how certain you have to be in order to lay minus 250 and minus 300. You know, you have to be saying 75% of the time this person's getting it done. 3 out of 4 times they're getting it done. That's a big ask when you're also saying that 3 out of 4 times it's going to decision. You know, it's like, well, then how sure are we that we're going to get it done on foreign soil in a fight that's expected to be competitive when one girl gives up takedowns and has lost a couple fights as a favorite before? It starts getting really dicey really fast. So couldn't agree with you more, man. Great points. And guys, always think about it from a theoretical perspective. Take each matchup as they come, break them down in terms of that, but also try and take note of long-term trends, things that happen over time. Recency bias, one of the easiest angles to target in MMA because it happens every week in at least one spot on the card where a recent performance, maybe a great knockout, sways the market completely towards a fighter that otherwise they were repulsed by 2 fights ago. So I think that's something to watch for. And here we've got Nassourdine Imavov in our next fight of the night at 185 pounds, taking on Chris Curtis. And to take the lead on this one, the biggest concern for me on Chris Curtis, I want to shout out Cody Saftik. He made a great point about this on the Dogger Pass podcast this week. He's had 5 fights roughly in the last 12 months. You know, the point that I had thought of early this week as well, Chris Curtis admitted that he was knocked out in his last fight against Kelvin Gastelum. That was in April. All right, we're turning it around the early weeks of June, and my man's going to get back in there and do another cage fight with a guy with the nickname Sniper. Something doesn't sound quite right to me, you know? And I think that Chris Curtis, he's a tough guy. He's pretty durable, but he's too willing to say yes. He just gets in there with anybody. Okay, sure. And he sees Strickland beat somebody, so he thinks I could do the same thing. Strickland beats Hermanson over 5, right? Then what does he think? Oh, I'll beat this guy over 3 rounds, no problem. Chases him around the octagon, never cuts him off, ends up losing the fight. I feel like that was instructive in some ways because it shows that Chris Curtis is an emotional fighter. And against bigger guys, he's had a little bit of a hard time. He's an undersized 185-pounder. Nassourdine Imavov just fought a fight at 205 pounds. He weighed in at 195, but he was literally in the midst of a weight cut. I don't know how much you guys have done weight cutting and whatever. I'm sure you guys on my panel understand a little bit, but even some people in the chat, maybe you've never done it. It's not easy to just go down, up, down, up. When you're telling your body, we need to go down, 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 and then you try and put it all back in, it's hard. You know, you have literal professionals that come in to help you put on as much weight as you can overnight. So for Imavov, he shows up at weigh-ins. He's only 195. He just stopped his weight cut. And he has to go out there and fight Sean Strickland, who's got 5-round cardio. So tough fight for him. That was in January. Now he gets, or even December, I can't remember. But either way, it was end of year, beginning of year. He's had 5+ months to turn this around, come back and turn in a better performance. You'd think he'd be motivated. He just got his ass whooped, right? So I think that that's a good sign for him. Whereas Chris Curtis, he's still talking about the last fight. He's still calling out the last opponent. And he's done a lot of fighting recently. He's gotten a lot of punches to the head. I think he can win this fight if he extends it, if it goes late, and if he goes to the body of Imavov, who's a long guy, 6'3". You could hit him to the body. But Yes, and I think my man Dan just made the point I'm making. Curtis KO'd Allen, a tall guy. He's done a good job of doing that. But I think that Imavov in this fight is dangerous in the early going. I think he lands big shots. Sean Strickland, he's been knocked out a handful of times, but he's normally had a pretty good chin. He ate big bombs from Jerry Cannonier and a couple other guys. I don't think he's a pushover by any means. And Sean Strickland went out there. He was able to take the shots. He went 5 rounds. Imavov was probably nervous to let his output go. He's never been 5 rounds. He's going with a bigger guy. I think in this fight, he's going to return to form a little bit. I think he's going to land big shots in the early going. And I would not be surprised if he was the first guy to knock out Chris Curtis in the UFC. But I don't have the strongest read on this fight. I'm going to leave this one alone, and I'll kick it to my panel. So Gerhart seemed flabbergasted by my take. You like Chris Curtis here, I take it, or at least you think I'm out to lunch on the knockout prop.
Yeah, the knockout prop. I think that you're onto something, with the Imavov side of things. But, I rate Curtis's durability pretty high. Here's what I will say. This is another fighter who has outperformed the market. He's plus 200 against Brendan Allen, gets it done. He's plus 200 against his training partner, Phil Hawes, gets it done. This guy constantly overperforms the market, and now you're seeing him become a little bit more honest and transparent. There's a big difference between a 5-round fight with Sean Strickland and a 3-round fight with Chris Curtis, who will wait. Sean Strickland will jab you for 25 minutes. There's a big difference in that. And then also you mentioned that Strickland didn't have to cut as much weight. That ended up being a catch weight bout, so he ended up coming a lot heavier than Imavov anticipated. So, I get that they're training partners, but the fight styles are completely different. The attributes are completely different. They are not the same fighter. Sure, they come from the same camp, but I don't think that's a be-all, tell-all signal here. I think Imavov, if you like him, I think that his number is probably going to continue to rise up. He's at minus 150 at certain books. He probably closes minus 180, and that's what I have him listed as. I just think that Curtis is a little bit outmatched here. I can see merit for him to get a knockout because he does attack the body very well, but he's a little too patient for my liking. He will wait for you to finish your attack before he counters. He did that with Buckley. It worked out well, but what we know about Buckley is he does that till exhaustion. I don't know that Imavov going from 5 rounds to 3 rounds is going to experience that kind of that decline. I like Imavov here. This is one of the favorites that I do side with, and I do still think that there is value on him at the current number, but I do think it widens as we approach fight time. That's the way that I see the fight. But Curtis has been one of those guys, man, where he's outperforming expectations. So should be a fun fight though.
Yeah, I agree, man. And I actually went from I was going to bet Brendan Allen by knockout, and then I saw that the line was like crazy on the fight ends by KO, and I was like, all right, I have to take that. And I ended up taking them both, and thank goodness, because Chris Curtis was getting touched up in both of the fights that he ended up winning by knockout against Phil Hawes too. Phil Hawes was whooping his ass, kind of like the Aliskerov fight. Aliskerov was much more honest and competitive from outset, but in that fight, Phil Hawes is landing good shots. He just can't take it on the comeback, right? So he ends up getting finished in brutal fashion there. Imavov, I feel like kind of underrated power because he had Phil Hawes hurt, but Phil Hawes just grabbed a hold of him. He couldn't out wrestle Phil Hawes, get him off of him when he had him hurt. So he kind of struggled to put that fight away and finish it. I think we've seen a little bit of improvements to his finishing upside over time. Still looking for that decisive UFC win, but I don't know, man. I think this is one where he could potentially get it. James, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a decent fight for Imavov because Curtis, we kind of know what he does. He's just a counter boxer. That's all he really does. He doesn't really throw many leg kicks. He doesn't wrestle at all. He just defends takedowns and counter boxes. The thing is he's really, really good at it. So it can often be a little bit deceiving, not only for potentially the fighters who fight him, but also just for us as gamblers, right? Because you watch it and you're like, oh, he's not really doing much. Look what Hermansson just danced on the outside. But I think when you're in there with such a good counter striker, it's very, very hard to get your own game off. But I do think Imavov has some tools to do that. Gastelum didn't really have the tools to get his own game off because although he does kick, he loves a brawl. He loves jumping in the pocket. He loves boxing himself. And he was boxing against one of the best counter boxers in the division. So I think for Kelvin Gastelum, it may have made Curtis look a little bit better than he actually is in certain matchups. And I think in this matchup, I think Imavov has a clean round 1 here. I think he wins round 1 at a very, very high clip. If you could bet on fighter to win a specific round, which I'm hoping one day they put those props out, because I think I'd be a millionaire by now. I think that he's probably going to win the first round at a good 70 to 80% clip, right? And when you're faced with that, it's like he only has to win one of the next 2 rounds. So, but, on the contrary, I do think Curtis has a decent chance to win round 3, because he's actually quite good at not only timing his opponents, but also reading his opponent's movements. And even in the Kelvin Gastelum fight, we have to give him respect, because he did say at one point, fuck it. I'm just going to, because I'm losing this fight. Fuck it. I'm just going to go in and kind of brawl with him. And it worked for him there, I just don't feel like it's going to work against someone like Imavov. He's a long-rangey guy. Looks like McGregor at times, good kicks, front kicks. He comes in with a good 1-2, the leaping uppercut 1-2. And so I think it's a close fight overall, though, I must say, because we see Imavov gas out in that Buckley fight. He didn't really gas out in the Strickland fight, but Strickland's not really going to do much to gas him out, although probably Curtis isn't going to do that either. For me, though, I'm going to pick Imavov, but I do think that Curtis has a good chance to win round 3. So I do think you could be looking at a 29-28. And when you're looking at a 29-28, it only takes one shot to make it a 29-28 the other way, right? So I'm not rushing to lay juice on Imavov here, but I do think it's a decent fight for him, and he should win it by decision.
I largely agree with you here, because when I'm looking at this fight, what I'm saying to myself is, I like the Imavov side. I think he's going to win. Yeah, I think he could even finish the fight. But if he doesn't finish the fight, it's probably going to come close. It's going to be within the margins. And I like to back up the ABCs say always bet on cardio, right? John Anik says it. I think it's a brilliant line. And the ABCs here are saying, do not bet Imavov, but he has been producing in the UFC. He just let everybody down. I feel like that's why this isn't a bigger line. You look at some of his previous lines against Buckley, he was a bigger favorite, for example. So Buckley just had a nip-tuck fight that he ended up getting finished and moving down a weight class. Chris Curtis is always a candidate to move down to 170 at some point. He's a little bit older, probably doesn't want to cut the weight, but in terms of size and where he'd be more natural, I think he'd probably be a more natural welterweight. So that's something to bear in mind here as well. Imavov, probably a mid-size 185er on the larger side, you would think, whereas the opposite is true for Chris Curtis. So I think that could be pronounced this week come face-off time. But we've got another fight at 185 pounds, and it's a fun one. We've got Eryk Anders, your boy, taking on Marc-Andre Barriault. The power bar, another Canadian taking on a challenge here, but I don't know, guys. I cashed big on Anders by KO last time out against Dawkins, and maybe that's biasing me here a little bit, but I feel like he's live to do the exact same thing to somebody like Marc-Andre Barriault. I feel like Barriault doesn't have great defense. He presents himself constantly. He likes to get into a fight, and sometimes that works out for him. But all I remember is the lead up to the Chidi and Njokuani fight. Everybody talked about he's so durable, but he's so durable. He's so durable. It's 185 pounds. You get hit in the head, you go to sleep sometimes. Like I thought that week it was baffling how much confidence there was that he wouldn't get finished. And I think that, in this kind of fight, Eryk Anders, he's not always perfect, but when he's on, he looks really good, man. He comes out and he blasts people. Against Darren Stewart, I thought he absolutely blasted Darren Stewart out of there. Then he gets DQ'd, or they have the mishap, whatever it is, they have to run it back. Way less impressive the second time out, but it's always harder to have a fight twice. It's harder to beat somebody twice, in my view. So I felt like Eryk Anders the first time looked aces. Then he comes out against Dawkins. He looked aces in that fight too. I feel like he's been looking career best lately, certainly looking more inspired than the 5, 6, 7 UFC fights prior to that. I feel like he renewed himself going to Arizona. He went to Fight Ready. He went to the MMA lab. I feel like he's been getting good training. So kind of like the Eryk Anders side here as a dog. And I think he's live to knock out Marc-Andre Barriault at plus 370. If it goes to decision, I think he's getting robbed. I don't think there's a chance he wins this one. MAB is going to throw more volume, and he's a tough guy. He might try and mix in some takedowns, but I just think Anders is a better athlete. I think he's more likely to get takedowns in round 1, and I also think he's more likely to knock out Marc-Andre Barriault. So I like Eryk Anders. What do you think, James?
Yeah, I don't necessarily think there's too much value on the knockout, like you said, with Eryk Anders. I do think there's potential value on his money line, but it's come down now, man. It's like plus 105, plus 110. I did like it a little bit when it was plus 125, but for me, it's just a fight. It's just a massive stay away fight. I think both fighters are kind of not mirror matchups, but they're very, very similar, just in terms of just their performances in the UFC, what they like to do, kind of pressure box with the grappling every now and then. I just think they're very similar. They've even fought some of the same fighters and been to close decisions with both of them. You know, you think of the Jun Young Park. I know Jun Young Park kind of dominated Barriault there, but, you know, he still had his moments in that fight. I know you said that he got knocked out against Chidi Njokwani, which he did, but I still do think he's very, very tough. And I do think he has a very, very good chin. I will say that. So that's the only reason I'm not really clamoring to play the plus 370 on the knockout prop. But for me, I think it's going to be a close fight. I think it probably goes to... It's going to be a high-paced fight, though. I will say this, right? I'm kind of up and down on whether it's going to go to decision or not, because I think they're both very tough. So for that reason, it'll probably go to decision because of how tough they are. But I know a lot of people on the inside the distance, and I understand why. It's a middleweight fight. It's going to be high-paced. Both fighters are going to throw a ton of strikes. Both fighters could get top time. I mean, there's going to be opportunities for the finish on both sides, but because they're so tough, I'm not really running to play it. So for me, I'm going to pick Eryk Anders. I think he's just a bit more of a put-together fighter. I think that, you know, he's probably a little bit more likely to win the striking. I think he does a lot of things that are not perceived to be good by the naked eye, but he's quite smart. You know, he always keeps his foot outside his opponent's foot when he's in that southpaw stance. He throws deceptively hard shots with the left hand. And I just think he does a lot of good work from the striking that could catch MAB a little bit off guard. But for me, it's a close fight and it could go either way. So it's a massive pass for me in terms of betting.
I feel you. Yeah, I was definitely looking at the plus 122s, the plus 130s on the Anders side, and a little bit more tempting than where it is now. And last time out against Dawkins, it was plus 600 by knockout. Now you're looking at plus 370. So it's definitely been nerfed down in terms of value. But I also just feel like, you know, with Marc-Andre Barriault, I kind of know what to expect from the guy. I feel like every fight he's going to sprint across the octagon, try and get in your face and fight. And if you do that against somebody like Eryk Anders, I think it could be a problem. So we've seen some guys out wrestle, out grapple Eryk Anders, you know, keep it competitive by point fighting him. But I don't feel like most people could take it to him in a brawl. So that's what makes it an interesting fight for me. But I agree with you. You'll be cursing yourself if you bet Eryk Anders and he gasses out, looks like his old self, you know, a little bit passive at times. And he's split decisions pass through his fingertips before close fights with Gerald Meerschaert and the like back in the day. Probably could have went either way. So he doesn't always win by a clear margin. You'd want a plus money tag to get involved with Anders as the older fighter here most of the time. What do you think about this one, Gerhart?
Yeah, I'm kind of with James on this. I'm starting to come to the acceptance that this fight is appropriately lined, and I don't like to bet on appropriate lines. I think that this is just an accurate number. You know, I think Eryk Anders moving away from fight ready is a little bit of a red flag to me, at least. Maybe some people see otherwise, but I think, you know, switching up teams, it could be a red flag sometimes. They do kind of mirror each other in a sense. I mean, both of them will kind of look to get the fight to the clinch, have some cage control time. MAB does the push thing, and he relies on his opponents to kind of gas out. He's been known for his durability. However, his past 2 losses have ended up in inside the distance losses. So I don't know, man. This is one of those fights that I just kind of want to stay off. I think Eryk Anders, what would his price be had he not knocked out Kyle Dawkins? You know, I don't know. Tough fight to break down. I would rather stay off of it, just watch it as a fan. I don't really want any action on it. I think my official prediction will be with the Eryk Anders side, and I do think that he will clip MAB, but I don't put a lot of confidence behind that prediction. Not enough to bet it. Stay off. I'm just going to watch the fight. So
who could blame you? You know, I think that that's a fair way to approach this. I don't blame anybody for passing. But the one thing I will, you know, circle back to is if I told you that Marc-Andre Barriault was 4-5-1 in the UFC and his best win was Julian Marquez, would you believe me? Because looking back at his resume, he's beaten some guys. He's been around for a long time. And his wins are Julian Marquez, Jordan Wright, Dolce Lungiambula, Abu Azaitar, and an overturned no contest against Oscar Piechota. He's never beaten anybody good in his whole career. So I actually think Eryk Anders would be far and away his best UFC win. And I don't like betting on somebody to get their best UFC win at chalk. So that's another thing that I'm keeping in the back of my head here. Some red flags on the Eryk Anders side. I do know what you guys are talking about in terms of burned bridges in the comment section. But the other thing is, it's kind of a wait and see approach for me because Eryk Anders, he left his old situation in Alabama and then looked career best at Fight Ready. So what do I have to assume he's going to look worse? I'm not sure. And certainly when you're betting on unknowns, you got to have it at plus money. So I'll wait and see if there's some love that comes back in on MAB. I would not be surprised if there is. He's going to be a local market fighter. He's cashed a lot of tickets for people. MAB round 3 or decision. People love that kind of bet. But I just think that Eryk Anders live in the early going. And I also am taking note of the fact that odds makers are respecting his KO power now, where they were not doing that in his previous bouts. So next up, we've got a fun one, guys. I think everybody universally agrees that this is one of the action fights of the card. Dan Ige, 50K, baby, taking on Nate the Train Landwehr. And you've got one guy who's coming on strong in Nate Landwehr. I loved his interviews this week. He sounds very confident, very positive. And what he was talking about was, people are telling me I'm taking a step up in competition. I've been fighting in Russia for 5 rounds. I've been doing all these things. I fought a lot of tough guys. I've broken people's jaw. He's like, there's nothing I'm afraid of in this cage. I'm 34, 35 years of age. I'm ready to fight anybody. I like that. He seems like a guy who's bringing the right attitude. The problem is, he's a guy that doesn't have as good a durability as Dan Ige, and Dan Ige hits like a truck. So I had Gavin Tucker, a nice young Canadian man, went out there and got flatlined in the first exchange, never even saw the punch coming. He was frozen in time. So I think Dan Ige hits very hard. We've seen when he takes step down in competition in the UFC, he tends to knock people the hell out. The problem is Nate Landwehr is tough as hell. He could get caught cold early, but the longer a fight goes, the more difficult it is to say this guy's going to get cleaned up because he fights very hard. He continues to push. He's got great cardio, and you'd never know that he was 35 years of age. He looks in great physical shape. He still wants to be there. He's as tough as any other fighter, as game as any other fighter. So I love watching Nate the Train. I think he brings a lot of interesting intangibles to the table, but I also can't bring myself to fade Dan Ige here because I just think he's got an easy path to winning this fight by knockout. Here's my one shout on this fight was I was pressed to come up with some props for this. I had thought that the fight ends by sub was a little bit sneaky. I think more often than not, these guys are going to bang it out. But I think Nate has shown a propensity and a willingness to wrestle in his last few fights. He's going to try and submit. He likes that front headlock series. He attacks it aggressively throughout the fight. But on top of that, if he gets hurt in this fight, I think he's going to try and wrestle. Dan Ige, that's where he's given up some positions before. He's gotten taken down. But he's a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He's aggressive in his own right. Between the two of these guys, they're attempting 2 submissions on average per 15 minutes. So I just think that they bring, a lot of aggression, a lot of pace. And I think it's not going to surprise me if either one of them gets dropped because Dan Ige, he's got great durability. He's got great recoverability, but he has been hurt before in the UFC. I think people forget when Edson Barboza hit him with a body shot that he didn't see coming. And he literally saw he was looking at Ghost and he grabbed a hold of him and just fell back into the guard. I feel like Dan Ige has had good survivability, but Nate's going to bring that dogfight to him. So I think somebody more often than not gets finished here, but it's a fight where I have no betting hooks in this one yet. I'm just leaving this one to the gods, and hopefully it's a great fight like we're expecting. What do you think about this one, James?
Yeah, I think that Dan Ige is the rightful favorite. Minus 300 or whatever he is a little bit like, I don't know, because obviously Landwehr's going to bring it. Landwehr's a legend though, man. I just have to say, shout out to Nate. He's hilarious, man. Anytime I watch his interviews or anything, I just laugh, bro. Like he's a legend, man. And he fights like he talks. He's always talked hyped up, crazy dude. That's exactly how he fights, man. The interview he gave after his last fight was like one of his best yet. And I think that in this spot, though, he's probably coming up against a bad matchup for him because I think Ige is really tough. And I think Ige can probably stay tough and stay gritty in that war that Landwehr likes to bring. Like Landwehr almost got cleaned by David Onama last time out. And it's funny because I remember doing a tweet and it went something like before the fight. And I said something like, David Onama is going to hit Landwehr so hard, I'll probably hear it through my TV. But if he doesn't knock him out, he could win the fight. So I really want to bet him, but I know he's going to get knocked. I know he's going to get dropped so hard. And I didn't bet him. And silly me, because obviously, he got dropped hard and then he came back. And that was a great cash for anyone who bet him there, plus 250 or whatever it was. But in this spot, I don't think we're fighting an Onama. I think we're fighting an Ige who doesn't gas like David Onama. Also, he doesn't put all of his power into his strikes like Onama. I think he's a bit more of a veteran at this stage. And even if Landwehr survives the first round, which is going to be tough because I think Ige is going to hit him in the first round very hard, like Onama did. I really do think that's going to happen, right? If he does survive it, I think Ige has the grit, the determination, and most importantly, which is underrated, which Onama didn't have, the UFC experience, the experience in the 5 rounds, Calvin Kattar fight, other fights where he's been scheduled against good fighters, Korean Zombie. I think he's got that experience that will allow him to not only survive, but also out-hustle Nate Landwehr. So even if Landwehr's coming on strong, landing a lot of strikes, I think that the damage is going to take a toll on Nate Landwehr. And we're going to see someone like Landwehr maybe dropped a couple of times during the fight. And even if he is throwing more volume, the judges are going to just side with the damage from Dan Ige. So, look, I understand anyone taking a shot because plus 250 on Landwehr is always going to be like a shot where you can't go too wrong, right? I don't think you can go too wrong, even if he was fighting the champion, right? You can't go too wrong. I mean, the guy's always going to bring it, and he's always going to be in for a shot at winning the fight. But I think Ige is a bit of a level above here, and so I definitely side with him to get the fight. I'm actually annoyed that the KO isn't plus 230 or whatever it was, because I'd probably be playing Ige KO. I know they got hit very quickly, and I wasn't fast enough to it. The limits are shit as well, so I often don't bet those lines. But, it's at plus 170 now, plus 165. I don't know how you feel about that, Liam, or you, Gerhart. I'm not really rushing to play it, but I do think it's got a good chance of hitting. Maybe round 1 is better. But, yeah, for me, I'm just going to pass completely, and I am going to pick Ige to win the fight, though.
Yeah, for me, this is a fight where I like it. I like the matchmaking. I like the construction, everything like that. But I don't love the betting odds. It's just there's nothing that I really fell in love with here. The fight ends by sub for me. It's just a slight misprice. It's not like I'd be making that my diehard prediction, but it's like I have to just look at where there may be value on the board. I thought it was a little bit wide given some of the considerations and the grappling on both sides. However, outside of that, it's just a difficult fight to call. It's a difficult fight to feel good laying big chalk against somebody like Nate, who wants to be there so bad, who's going to compete. But then if you lay Nate, or if you bet on Nate Landwehr and then he goes out there and gets starched in the first exchange, you're going to be like, wow, why did I really need to do this? So for price, I understand why people are getting to the dog, but for me, probably just a pass here. What do you think, Gerhart?
Yeah, so how I mentioned how I want my minus 300 favorites to get it done inside the distance. This is one of those favorites. I think Dan Ige has a lot of room to get it done inside the distance. My official prediction in this fight is actually that he's going to get a submission. I do think that he's going to knock down Nate Landwehr. Oh, wow. Cool, Daz. I think he's going to knock down Nate Landwehr, and they're going to go to the ground. And I think Nate's got a little bit of dog in him to where he won't get knocked out completely. I mean, the ref might stop it, but I don't know. I like the submission number opposed to the TKO number. I just think that Nate Landwehr has kind of benefited from his recent matches a little bit. He's outperformed the market again. And I keep talking about that. But against Ludovic Klein, he's, I believe, like a plus 300 dog, submits him. Onama plus 200, I believe it was a decision win. And then he beats Austin Lingo. But he dropped that first round, if I remember correctly. I don't know that if
I had Austin Lingo and Lingo KO won, and I was like,
Lingo won that first round though, right?
Yeah, he just didn't step on the gas, and I was like, the longer this goes, the worse it's gonna get. And he literally got finished instantly in round 2. I was like, nice.
I think that Ige is I don't know. I think going from Lingo to Ige is just a different ball game. I honestly would say that the price is appropriate on the side of Dan Ige. Massive step up in competition compared to, where Dan Ige's trajectory is. I just think that it just aligns for almost a highlight reel finish. So I'm going to be in the Dan Ige cap, and it sucks to say because I love Nate the Train. I love the fights that he brings. I love his style. I love how he gets the crowd up and going. He's a fan-friendly fighter with zero aspirations of a belt. So I just like the Ige side.
So what we got to pray for here is that Dan Ige submits Nate Landwehr in an absolute fight of the night. So that way they both can get the nice 50K bonus that they're looking for. Sounds like perfect matchmaking to me. So Dan Ige sub 2 or 3 for the absolute culture. would be a great play. So shout out to MMA Propaholic in the chat. He says he's going to be rocking with the under 2.5 here at plus money. And I think a lot of people are going to be scared off that. Because you got two very tough guys here. But when you got two guys that are going to bring the fight, that are going to stand in the pocket, bang with one another, that both have submission upside to an extent, I can't really hate that shot on the under. So shout out to our guy Propaholic. That's probably, about a plus 100 or so if I had to guess, and the fight doesn't go to decision. And with two guys that are going to fight their hearts out like this, I don't hate it. But, definitely Dan Ige is a durable guy, hard to finish, hard to submit. He's tough everywhere. So something to keep in the back of our mind there. But next up, guys, we've got a fun fight, another fight that I don't think many people are expecting to go to decision, right? We got Mike Mallott proper taking on Adam Fugitt here. And Adam Fugitt, he has definitely overperformed expectations in the UFC, right? Comes out, steamrolls Kinoshita as a big underdog. That took me by surprise. I didn't necessarily expect that. He ran over Solomon Renfro in his lead up to the UFC. That was surprising as well. This is a common opponent between these two guys. I made the point earlier this week, Mike Mallott was kind of getting owned by Solomon Renfro. Renfro's landing everything he wants, left hook, right hand, moving all around him. And then all of a sudden, left hook counter, Renfro's down. Mike Mallott, literally, it's like a 3-second sequence from when he drops him with the left hand to when he submits him with the rear naked choke. No hooks at the beginning. He had him dead to rights. It was just beautiful killer instinct. Something we don't always talk about in MMA is how good somebody is at finishing. What does it matter if I get you hurt? If every time I let you back up to the feed, I never get a chance to get you out of there. He's got good finishing instincts, whether that's with the chokes, whether that's with the hands. When he hurts you, he normally puts you away. That's why he has so many first round finishes. But that's also the reason why we don't see him get extended very often. Last time he went to decision, it was a draw. He gassed out in rounds 2 and 3. It looked ugly. It's been a long time, but there's no proof that he could do it. He says he could do it. A lot of people say they could do it, and then they gas out. So I think that for Mike Mallott, he could definitely experience an adrenaline dump in this fight. He's fighting in front of his home crowd. He's going to come out here. He's going to be looking for the finish in round 1 like he always does. But I think he is live to get it because there's one thing that I saw on the tape from Fugitt. Number one, he's a little bit hittable on the feet. He kind of keeps himself upright, but he's got good striking. He throws a lot of kicks. He's a dangerous offensive fighter. But then he gets hurt on the comeback. And I'll tell you what, he got submitted with almost the exact finishing sequence that Mike Mallott favors with a guillotine on submission underground. He was going against Nick Maximov. Maximov's a good grappler, but he's not even with the UFC anymore. Okay, he was just all right. He got submitted in the first round with a front choke series from Andre Petrosky. Okay, so he's a good grappler. He's not the world's best grappler. He lost a lot of matches at submission underground. Fugitt, he submitted him very quickly. He submitted him with a guillotine choke, which is what Mike Mallott loves to do. So Mike Mallott, in my opinion, is one of the only Canadian guys that's got some marketability. He's a handsome guy. They can put some stuff behind him. He's fighting a 34-year-old welterweight here. So I think Fugitt, if the fight gets extended, becomes an extremely live underdog. There's a reason why he's being played. But I also think that the early finishing upside is with the Mallott side. I think he's got great guillotine chokes. I think he's dangerous there. And his club and sub is lethal because he's very fast at transitioning. And just like we talked about earlier, James, he's not going for the arm bar. Okay, he's not trying to put your arm behind your back and chicken wing you or something like that. He tries to put you in a choke that will quickly put you to sleep. And that's what he normally does. So I like Mike Mallott's grappling when it's the first layer. But as they get extended, I've seen his black belt matches. He just looks all right. He looks like an average black belt. And I do think Fugitt is a gamer. So if he can get you underneath, he can extend you, he can lay on top. I think Fugitt by sub at plus 1,200 is insane because I think he's going to try and grapple often in this fight. And I think that Mike Mallott in the early going, when he's fresh, he's the way better grappler. But when this gets later on, when he starts to get a little tired, if he spent it all going for the finish in round 1 and Fugitt's still there, that's when I think it could go sideways. So for me, some potential value on the underdog here, but I ultimately just have a gut feeling that Mallott's going to submit him in the first round. What do you think, James?
Yeah, it's tough, man, because this Mike Mallott dude, I have to be honest. I told you about multiple fighters on this card that I've won a lot of money on, right? Beneil Dariush, Aoriqileng, Miranda Maverick. But there's also some fighters that I've lost a lot of money on, and Mike Mallott is one of those guys. When he came into the UFC, I've been trying to fade him in every single fight. I bet Mickey Gall against him, and nobody in this world can convince me that Mickey Gall was not melting that guy and was not going to break him in round 2. No one can convince me. I don't care what you say about Mickey Gall. I'm not hearing it. I'm not up for the debate. Mickey Gall was going to finish that dude, but he got finished. He got finished brutally, really, with a brutal left hook, yeah? And then I also bet on Johan Lioness, which he wasn't going to melt Mike Mallott, right? That was the complete opposite fight. He looked terrible in that fight. Mike Mallott did a decent job of maintaining range there. And as soon as he got it to the ground, I mean, he just choked him out easily, right? Johan Lioness, I don't know what happened to that dude. The guy just seems like he doesn't want to fight in his last few fights. But regardless, I've been trying to fade this guy, and there's a reason for it. I think he's a bit of a gasser. Yes, okay, it's not a guarantee that he's going to gas because we haven't really seen him out of round one in a long, long time. Maybe he's shored up those holes. I don't think so. I don't believe so. I think that when he is extended into round 2 and round 3, especially if it's a grinding type of affair, a high-paced affair, I think he's going to fall apart. And so that's the main reason why I want to bet him. Also, I think he's pretty poor defensively. You know, when he's pushing the pace and stuff, he's not too bad, but I don't think he has good defensive striking at all. I don't think he has good defense. I mean, Mickey Gall was touching him up easily. I think he's definitely there to be hit. He's a very good finisher, though. That's what he is. And we've seen that in his last 4 fights. Renfro, the dude on Contender Series, Mickey Gall, Johan Lioness.
Simone Smotrisky.
That dude, you know, there's a reason why I skipped that name out of them all, but you got it for me. So, you know, we see that he's a great finisher. In this fight, he's definitely got a chance to finish like he does in almost every fight. You know, his ceiling in round 1 is always going to be fairly low, but I feel like Adam Fugitt's a good bet here. You know, I'm doing it again. I'm fading him again. Maybe you don't want to listen to me because, as I've said, I've tried to fade him and it's gone horribly wrong every single time. So maybe just ignore my opinion on Mike Mallott's fights because apparently I don't call them right. But I'm going back to the well again. They're giving me the same numbers they always do, plus 180. Very nice number. And I'm just hoping he survives round 1, right? If he survives round 1, I think he's going to take him out. I've also played Fugitt in round 2, plus 800, plus 900. Fugitt in round 3, plus 1,500, plus 1,600. I might add the sub. Round 2 and round 3. Now you've mentioned it, you know, so I might just burn loads more money on multiple bets once again. But I have to be honest, and I think there's value on Fugitt, so I have to bet it. I think there's value, and I'm going to bet it.
I love it, man. And this is why we always talk about prices, right? Like if you said to me, Liam, who do you think's going to win? I think Mike Mallott should win. He's a little more athletic. He's a little more dangerous. When we talk about who's going to win fights, often we talk about who's going to win the first round. I think Mike Mallott should win the first round. But it's what happens if that doesn't happen, right? What happens if the fight goes beyond our expectations? Everybody in the world watches the fights, right, a little bit and maybe comes in with a perspective. How many of them win money betting on sports? Very few. Right. And it's people that are a little bit unconventional in their ways of thinking. You got to see things before they happen because otherwise it'll be accounted for in the price. So as far as I'm concerned, I've been with you, James. I actually bet against Simone Smotrisky. I just felt like it was too much, right? You had a coach from Team Alpha Male at the time fighting a guy who was 21, right? That's one of my favorite angles to look for. 21-year-old kid against a coach, Johnny Parsons against Solomon Renfro. Like when you get a guy who's a young student, an apprentice on the come up against a coach in a gym, different dynamic. And I feel like it often shows up in fights. When we're talking about Mike Mallott now, though, he's back to being an active athlete. He's ready to go. I tried to fade him with Mickey Gall. And what I was proud of is that I had a 1+ unit bet on the Mickey Gall line. And then I had a half unit bet on Johan. So I knew that it wasn't as good a spot, but I was like, I'll get back in the water. Still, the water wasn't nice. And the thing that is definitely keeping me scared on this is that we're right back in the same range. The point you mentioned, James, we're right back to the plus 170, plus 175, plus 185. He's been money in this range. But how long? You know, he's 70% and he's producing with these first round knockouts where he's taking some damage on the comeback. Eventually that bill's going to come due. Gerhart, are you with us? Do you think this is potentially a live dog? How are you viewing this fight?
Yeah, I'm with you guys. I do kind of think that this is a live dog. I don't know that I'm going to be betting it. I do think that this is a prime spot for Mike Mallott to kind of showcase his fighting game. I think he will be the fan favorite. Now, whether he performs under adversity or not remains to be seen. I think Fugitt is one of those fighters, though, that if you don't get him out of there in round 1, like I think Mike Mallott's path to victory is, I think he'll melt you. I think he can even win a decision, just fuck around and just, you know, melt you for 15 minutes. I wouldn't put it past him, but I also think that he has finishing upside as well. Mike Mallott, and I'm with James on this too. I bet Johan based on what I saw from Mickey Gall touching him up. Lost that bet, but it's a fighter that I just see has he has losing characteristics that remain to be seen, but they're there. Like he's getting touched up by Mickey Gall. The fight with Johan didn't last as long as I expected it to. But I thought Johan would touch him up at least once. Nothing really came of that fight. And here we are with Adam Fugitt. Fugitt's been outperforming his market number as well. Big dog against Solomon Renfro. He wins that fight. Big dog, or he was a big dog against Michael Morales, but something I want to say, he lost that fight, but he made it competitive. He didn't look like a plus 500 underdog to me, or whatever his closing number was. He didn't look that. He competed for as long as that fight lasted. Then he goes out there and gets Kinoshita, wins that fight, and now we're getting him at another dog odd against a guy who does have losing characteristics. I mean, I kind of want to see where the line goes. I kind of just want to watch this fight. I kind of want action. It just depends. It's a pay-per-view card, so I don't know. I'm trying to talk myself into siding with the dog, but I do see Mike Mallott. You know, I see path to victories for both fighters. I'm not going to put it past him to get it done inside of round one either. So there's just a lot of variables in this fight. I don't know that I'm going to be putting any money on this just yet, but hearing you guys talk about it makes me kind of lean the dog as well. So yeah, we'll see.
See, what's gross for me about this fight is like, I could see some pass for Mallott that I'd want to bet on. The numbers all suck. You know, Mallott in round one is like plus 180. Mallott KO 1 and sub 1 are both 5-1 and under. It's like, they're not giving you any meat on the bone. You know, Eryk Anders, who's a middleweight, is 8-1 to win by knockout in round one against a guy who was knocked out in the first round 2 fights ago. It's like, you just can't convince me that those are good numbers. So that's my problem. Is like, I think Mallott, you know, would be the side, except at the numbers that we have. And I think that what I'm going to do is I'm going to exercise some patience. I think that Fugitt is a sharp side potentially, but I don't think he's a public side at all. I think most people are going to see these two guys at face-offs and say, that guy doesn't look like very much, you know, just looks a little bit like scraggly. Mike Mallott, good-looking guy, muscles, right? And he's going to have the Canadian flag. People are going to be cheered up, fired up for him. I think if it goes over 2-1, that would be the kind of entry point where I start to look at it a lot more closely. But for now, I'm comfortable leaving this alone because it's right in that same range that hasn't gone well for me. So I'm gonna exercise some patience here, and I think that a lot of the public love, the parlay love, will come in on this fight later on in the week. So for me, no need to get in early. I'll wait and see how this shakes out. But again, I am not kidding. The Fugitt plus 1,200 by sub just feels like a misprice. I don't think that's going to stick around. So for whatever that's worth. Next up, guys, we've got probably the most fascinating fight on the card. So I want to encourage everybody, if you haven't already, we got 71 people rocking with us live. We should have 71 likes on this video, and we should have at least 71 people subscribe to the channel right now because we're bringing you great fight talk each and every week. And we've got 2 great guests to break down a fascinating lightweight fight between Beneil Dariush and Charles, the champion, Oliveira. Everybody loves this guy. I love Charles too. He had a great run up to the title, but then he loses it on the scale. He goes out there against Justin Gaethje, gets the job done, goes out there against Islam Makhachev next time out, unable to deliver. So I think that it's fascinating. We're talking about the fact that Charles Oliveira goes from being, plus 150 or so underdog at close against Islam Makhachev, widely regarded as the best lightweight in the world, but now he's back to being a plus money underdog against Beneil Dariush. Last fight out for Beneil Dariush closes over a 2-1 dog against Gerhart. So the market's gone every which way but loose on this fight. And I think that part of that is justified. You know, when you look at how Charles has been fighting a lot of these guys, most of them have no interest and no ability to scramble with him, to go on the ground. Justin Gaethje looked like that was the first time he had dusted off his wrestling shoes in 12 months. He goes out and gets a takedown now. In his last fight, everybody forgets it. His wrestling and grappling has looked very suspect in his recent run in the UFC, especially against the best guys. So I think that's one thing to keep in the back of our mind. On top of that, Dustin Poirier, how have you been able to get to him? How have you been able to beat that guy? You extend him in the fight, you make him fight for longer, you take his back, and then it gets dicey for him. That's where he doesn't like to be. That's where he gets uncomfortable. So Charles did everything right. He beat up Dustin to the body in that fight. Did a lot of things right. But I think in this fight against Beneil is a guy that I could see him winning this fight a variety of different ways, right? I don't think Charles winning a decision is very likely here. He's not a decision fighter by and large. He tends to be a guy that's kill or be killed. So when I look at Beneil, I think he's a guy that manages rounds pretty well. I think he's a guy that's hard to take down. I think he's an athletic scrambler. I don't think he's easy to control. Some guys have been able to submit Beneil. So that's one of my concerns here. It's like Michael Chiesa fight. I'll never forget that. Beneil's a better grappler. Didn't matter. Longer guy, got on his back, body triangle, and the fight's over. That is a concern against Charles. Charles has good knees to the body. We've seen Beneil get hurt before. He's a guy that's a little bit older for the division. All these things. But I just think right now, momentum is real. I think Beneil is coming on right now. I think he's a very difficult guy to beat. I think he's got grappling, wrestling, and striking to go. I think he's a powerful guy on the feet. I think he wants it as bad as anybody. That's a hard guy to beat right now. So I like the Beneil side. And, I'm not anxious to go lay it against Charles Oliveira. He's been one of the best dogs in the UFC. He's been a dog that made me a ton of money. The Tony Ferguson opportunity that we'll never get back, like plus 140. That was, I think, an absolute blessing from the heavens. I bet him inside the distance and on the money line against Poirier. Thought that was a great spot. Poirier is allergic to grappling against high-level guys. We're not seeing that now. Now we're seeing a different situation in a different spot. I think that Beneil is as good as anybody in the lightweight division. I'm excited to see this fight play out. I thought the last fight against Gerhart was going to look a lot different. I thought he was going to struggle with the takedowns. I thought Gerhart was going to get on top of him. And his takedown defense never looked better. He's a guy who's continuing to improve in my view. So I think the biggest danger factor for Beneil is getting hurt in this fight. Because I think if he gets hurt, he's liable to get submitted and he's liable to get finished via knockout. I think the longer the fight goes, the more it favors Benny. So ABC say always bet on cardio. I like Beneil Dariush to get it done this weekend. What do you think, James? We'll start with you, brother.
Yeah, I love Benny in this spot. Well, I think it's a very hard fight, and I think that is definitely a chance for him to get knocked out. But I really think Beneil's going to win. I think one fight is on an upward trajectory, and I think one fight is on a downward trajectory. And you could call me crazy because he only lost to Islam Makhachev, but this is my prediction, and we'll see how it goes. Beneil Dariush has been an absolute money train in the UFC, and he's been an absolute money train for me. He's been the most consistent fighter that has won me money in the sport's history. Maybe he hasn't won me the most money because I've had really, really big bets on other fighters singularly. But in terms of consistently winning me money every single fight, it's Beneil Dariush easy. I bet him in like his last 5 fights, bet him against Gerhart, bet him all the way back against Nicky Holtzkin, not Nicky Holtzkin, good kickboxer there. The other Scott Holtzman, that dude. Bet him against him, first round knockout. Bet him against Close. That was scary. That was close, but he knocked out Close. And then also bet him against CDF as an underdog, plus 100, which was ridiculous. I know it was a close fight, but the dude just keeps on winning. Sometimes he looks a little bit maybe underwhelming because he does seem like he gasses a little bit. He takes hard breaths, but he keeps fighting, He won the 3rd round against Gerhart after Gerhart shot about 50 takedowns. So I don't think we can call the guy a gasser at this point. I think the only thing I'll say about Beneil Dariush is that he does have a suspect chin. And I do believe that that's the case. So everything else we say about Beneil Dariush, it's on the plus side. I think he's one of the best jiu-jitsu practitioners to ever fight in the lightweight division. I think he's a better jiu-jitsu practitioner than Charles Oliveira. I know people see Charles Oliveira and go, oh, this dude's got the most subs in UFC history. I don't think he's subbing Beneil Dariush. Beneil Dariush is an absolute whiz on the mat. I mean, the guy is unbelievable. We see that in his fights and in his jiu-jitsu career. So I don't think that Charles Oliveira is just going to go out there and sub this dude. I don't think he's going to take him down because I think Beneil's got good takedown defense. And I don't think he's going to hold him down. Look, he may get a takedown or two because Charles is very dangerous in the clinch. You may hit him with an elbow and get a takedown when he's off guard. That's definitely a possibility. But I think Beneil's basically better everywhere. The only thing I'll say is Charles is probably a little bit more potent on the feet. He's a little bit crisper. He's a little bit of a better finisher on the feet, and he is more wild. So that's kind of Beneil's kryptonite, someone who's going to throw hard, fast, early, and who's athletic. Because we saw what happened when he fought Alex Hernandez. He kind of got caught off guard there. So I do think that's a possibility that Charles hurts him on the feet. But in this spot, I like Beneil. I think he's got the rest and upside. I think he can take Charles down. I think he can submit Charles in round 2 or round 3 when Charles gets a little bit tired. I think he can knock out Charles on the feet. Charles has been dropped in 5, 6, 7, whatever it is. Charles gets dropped all the time. And Beneil hits hard. He's dropped many, many fighters recently. He dropped Gerhart. He knocked out Holtzkin, dropped Gerhart Close. I think that Beneil does a really, really good job at maintaining range. Sometimes he can brawl. We know that. But he's very underrated at maintaining range with his left kick and even his right kick. And I don't think Charles has particularly seen that. If you go back and see some of his fights, Justin Gaethje loves to get in a brawl. Charles is thriving in a brawl in 2022, Dustin Poirier loves to get in a brawl. You know, I mean, say what you want. The guy goes back and forth. He's in a brawl. Yeah, he's technical, but he loves to brawl. Michael Chandler loves to brawl. You know who doesn't love to brawl? Islam Makhachev. And what did Makhachev do to him? Dominate him on the feet. He maintained range. Charles couldn't do anything. I know Dariush can get sucked into brawls at times, but Dariush is elite at keeping his range and his distance. So I do think that he's going to be able to do that against Charles in this spot. I haven't bet Dariush yet because I was going to bet him. The line, I was so upset because I thought that the money would come in on Charles, or at least it would stay pick him. But I think the sharp money has come in on Dariush. So I can get him at -140 now. So I may play that. I'm kind of just waiting to see where it goes. But I mean, at this point, I've just told about 100 people that I really like Dariush. So it might go the other way. I don't know what's going to happen. But my pick is Beneil Dariush. And I think he's going to do, I think he's going to cash me some money once again.
I absolutely loved Rafael Cordero in the corner in that last fight against Gerhart. After round one, it was a close round one, probably went to Benny, but he says to him, we won round one, and I prefer to say we lost round one, right? He's like, we're going to go out there and fight hard for the rest of these 15 minutes. And that's what you see from Beneil. He's a very coachable guy. You got to kill him. So I think Charles has the skills to kill him, but I don't think you have to kill Charles. Sometimes you just have to show him, I want it more than you do. And I think that for Beneil, nobody wants it better than this guy right now. That's the central thesis of my capping, but it's not without its, hesitation. Gerhart, what do you think, brother?
Yeah, I think that this number kind of got away from me a little bit. At first glance, I was looking towards the Benny B side, and then, I open up my bookie app, and it's Charles Oliveira can be had for +130 at this point. And I just think the number's gotten away from me a little bit. I think an honest line is probably pick 'em, just because I think Charles Oliveira can mix it up well. He has a Muay Thai stance, and he's not scared to go to the floor because he trusts his jiu-jitsu. He's not scared to get rocked or wobbled. But the difference here is that I think Dariush is also not scared to go in your guard, whereas Dustin Poirier, Justin Gaethje, those are guys who didn't want to follow him to the ground. I don't think Dariush has that issue. I'm going to give Dariush the power advantage, but as far as striking and technical striking, I kind of want to give it to Charles, to be honest. I might disagree with you guys ever so slightly in that aspect, but I think both fighters do have a path to victory in this spot. But my official prediction is going to be Dariush. I just wish that I would have gotten in at the -110 price tag at opening number. I think the market's just moved a little bit away from me. And when it comes to betting, I like to be a little greedy. I want numbers that I want to bet on and not what the books are offering me. So this is one that just kind of got away. It'll make for a fun fight to watch. I do think Benny will get it done, but it's not going to shock me at all if Charles Oliveira goes out there and gets it done. There's not going to be a lot of shocking results or outcomes in this fight. I think, the floor is open for either fighter to get it done. I just want to see Benny get a title shot. I'm rooting for him. The number is just something that got away from me. Simple as that. So, yeah.
Yeah, I was also looking at the -130. I wake up, it's -150. I'm like, oh, you know what? Maybe I leave this one alone. But the truth is, I also have patience on this fight because I truly believe there's going to be a flood of Charles Oliveira money that comes in late on this fight. He's a very popular guy on social media. He's a very popular guy amongst UFC fans. So as far as the public side goes in this fight, I don't know that the public's ever going to line up with Beneil, but I also think on the other side, maybe for recent performances, you could get a touch of recency bias from the gambling community on the Beneil side. But I think that this is a fight where, Charles doesn't want this fight and Beneil wants to fight anybody to show that he deserves a title shot. So kind of two guys with different level of motivation. And we talked about it before, people coming off title fights, Kai Kara France last week, maybe he deserved the nod, but ever so slight motivation spots go to the people that have never got there. They've never seen the top of the mountain. They still want to get there. The other guy's been there and had a little bit of a letdown. So something to keep in mind here. Oliveira got the title. He has the records. He's got all the wins. Beneil has been the one struggling to get that recognition. What better way to get recognition before a title fight than getting a big win over a former champion? So just something to keep in mind. Next up, guys, we got the main event of the evening. So fired up to break down this one. It's my favorite fight on the card to talk about. Because I think that we have a live underdog in the main event. And I think that Irene Aldana maybe not getting the love that she deserves this week. So let's talk about the problems on the Aldana side and some reasons I faded her in the past. You know, she gives up some takedowns, right? She doesn't have perfect wrestling, but I think that she's been a fighter that despite her age, right? She's the same age as Amanda, virtual age parity here, but she's been hungry her entire career and making improvements and showing off that she has an improving set of skills. Last fight, she gets taken down by Macy Chiasson after landing a bunch of big strikes in the feet. And then she goes for an armbar series. You know, the announcers, the only thing they talked about between rounds 1 and 2 is whether or not Macy tapped, and it looks like she did. So she probably tapped out in the first round. Okay, no problem. Do you guys, if you've never competed before, you don't know that there's a huge adrenaline dump. If you think I just won a contest, it's over. Yeah, elation. My goals have come true. No, go back out there and keep fighting. That's a huge adrenaline dump. So she goes out there, basically thinks she won the fight. Okay, didn't win the fight. Then she has to come back out there, compose herself for round 2. Basically, Macy knows she's a gasser. She's like, I'm going all out. She comes in overweight for the fight. She gets the takedowns. And what happens? She ends up getting finished. She ends up having to disengage from on top. So I feel like we've seen Aldana improve her ground game off of her back. I feel like we've seen her show that she's a dangerous striker on the feet. Hungry, motivation, all the things that I want to see for an underdog here. She's never tasted that title glory. Amanda Nunes last fight had a lot to prove. Juliana Pena was talking a lot of shit. She beat her in the first fight. Everybody's saying, oh my God, Amanda Nunes really was never that good. Okay, I got to come back and set the record straight. I got to beat this girl. And she did that. And she proved it right again. So she's the double champ, and she proved everybody wrong again. And she's 35 years of age with a family, with a farm in Brazil, and everything else she's got going on in her life. How many more times does she need to beat up the next girl? How many more times does she want to do this? I don't know. But I would be more surprised if she had 3 more UFC fights than if Irene Aldana did. So I like the Irene Aldana side here. I think Mexico's been on a run. I think Diego Lopez showed off his dangerous ground game from his back. What did Dana White say? You did not lose that fight. After the fight that he had against Movsar Evloev, he told him to his face, you did not lose that fight. That's Diego Lopez, the Brazilian jiu-jitsu coach of Irene Aldana and Alexa Grasso. How long has he been working with them? 8 years. 8 years of working on these two ladies. And what did he say before the Grasso fight? I think she's going to surprise the world. I think she's going to beat this girl. And he's saying the exact same thing about his other pupil here in Irene Aldana. She's a little bit older, 35 years of age. I don't think she's a touch less hungry. I think she's inspired by the fact that she just saw the proof of concept. All that we've been working on is championship level. It's good enough to beat a GOAT. I think she's going to do it. So I like Irene Aldana. I think she gets it done. The last point I'll make here as I kick it over to my man Gerhart is that we've seen 4 out of 5 losses for Amanda Nunes come inside the distance. 80% of her losses, more than half of the career wins of Irene Aldana are inside the distance. She's a finisher. When it goes to the cards, gets a little bit dicey. Sometimes she gets taken down and gives up bad positions, but she's dangerous from everywhere. She can strike on the feet and she can submit from the ground. I think she's a dangerous prospect, and I think plus 475 is disrespectful, ITD. Gerhart, what about you?
Man, yeah, you broke it down very well. And I want to segue into something that you said before heading into this breakdown. Is you mentioned how Albazi versus Kai Kara-France, one guy had the motivation, the other guy has already been there, done that. And that's kind of what we're seeing in this spot. But you can't cap that. You can't cap motivation, and you can't cap, at least I can't. I can't place a number on Aldana and how hungry she is. Now, what I will say is, I wonder what this price would be had she not lost to Juliana Pena the first time around, because I think that this number is really, it's telling, because I think that there's room for Amanda Nunes to look like a minus 400 favorite, in all honesty. I think that she has every path that she wants to actually get it done, but it remains to be seen how hungry she is once we get into that octagon. Her last fight against Juliana Pena to win the belt back, she ended up going southpaw, which just tricked Pena all the way. I don't think that Aldana is going to have any issues with a change of stance. She's a great boxer. She can switch stances herself as well. And I think Aldana has been working on, or at least addressing, the takedown defense of this game, or of this fight, because I think that that's probably where Amanda Nunes wants to go. I don't think that you really want to be striking with Aldana, knowing that would be her path to victory in the spot. But I don't know. I can also see Nunes going out there and kickboxing her 15 minutes too. I mean, this is a tough fight to break down. I'm not really a fan of the overall number right now, but I do think that you're right in the aspect that, these Mexican fighters are coming up. Like, there is no cap on them. There is no, nothing is going to shock me. If Aldana wins, I'm not going to be shocked either. I'm going to come back. I'm going to reference this podcast and be like, oh, Liam said so. But it's just that's what you see. You see hunger, you see determination, you see skill. They're not being, told no. They're doing all the right things, everything that you want to see. And yeah, it's just, I don't know how you can place a price tag on motivation. Where do you cap that? There's not a number for me for all those reasons. I don't know that I'm really going to be betting this fight. I do think that the people who are on the Nunes side, they know what she has brought to the table. The people who are on the Aldana side are under the impression that they know what she can bring to the table. So tough fight. I don't know that I would be recommending anything at the current number. It's just weird because I can see where Nunes would be closer to like minus 400, minus 450 had the first Pena fight never took place. So I don't know. That's my breakdown. And maybe you guys can talk me on to the dog, but I think at the current price, I don't know. I think if you got an early on Aldana, that's good on you. But yeah, you gotta be greedy with this game. It moves quick.
Yeah, I think that, people are not giving Aldana very much due. I feel like in this fight, a couple of people in the chat, how many other women have one punch knockout power in the women's bantamweight division? I'll wait. You guys can name them off for me, but very few, right? How many have recorded one punch first round knockouts? Very few. So I think that, number one, she's got power, which is something that Amanda normally has as the only one in the matchup, right? She goes strike for strike with Juliana Pena. She got frustrated. I don't think she was really getting beat up. I don't think she was getting badly hurt there. She got frustrated. She made a bad decision, and then she ended up quitting in that Pena fight. And so I agree. That could be factoring into the line here. But then she comes back and looks career best, steamrolls her. I think that was the ultimate motivation spot. And I think anything we see here will be a step down in motivation. Whether or not that's enough to give Aldana a window, we're yet to find out, but I'll be anxiously awaiting the answer Saturday night. James, what about you, brother?
Yeah, so it's tough because Gerhart is 100% right. Honestly, one of the hardest things in this game is capping motivation and capping when fighters are on that downslope. It's almost impossible, honestly, especially when they've been reigning champions and are just winning and winning and winning and winning. We know we can cap a downslope when they've lost their last two, but in terms of Amanda Nunes, I mean, apart from the Pena fight, which she come back and dominated, she's won so many fights in a row. And I do think that she has to be on a massive downhill to lose this fight against Aldana. I don't think she can lose it unless she has fallen a couple of steps behind. And it's just so hard to cap that. Because skill for skill, I think Amanda Nunes is clearly the better fighter in almost every range. Even in the boxing, I think it's probably at least 50-50. And I mean, this is MMA. You're not even talking about the leg kicks or the grappling or anything like that. I have a bit of a different concept or outlook on that Macy Chiasson fight as you, because Aldana was like a minus 200 in that spot, minus 225. And I thought the fight looked to pick him. I know she potentially submitted her in the first round and she got that up kick KO. But I mean, just looking at the fight, if I'd reline it, or at least in that iteration, it looked to pick him to me. She was getting dominated in the wrestling, and I think Amanda Nunes can do it here. If she's getting taken down and, in my eyes, looking to pick him against Macy Chiasson, it doesn't look good going up against Amanda Nunes. But we just saw another massive, massive favorite, one of the best fighters in the women's division history, Valentina Shevchenko, get beat by Alexa Grasso in another fight where she is 10 steps ahead of Alexa Grasso in MMA. And she was winning that fight comfortably and clean. Alexa Grasso had a few good moments, but she got a submission in round 4. And I do think that is because Valentina's, it's the motivation. She's coming to the end of her career. It's the focus. They take their eye off the ball a little bit. These things are almost impossible to cap. So I wouldn't be massively surprised. We've just seen, if Aldana wins, we've just seen Nunes lose against Pena in a fight that we know she shouldn't have lost, because look what happened in the rematch, right? So how can you, what is the true line of Amanda Nunes versus Juliana Pena? Because she looked minus 1,000, minus 2,000 in the rematch. But in the first fight, she looked minus 110, right? And I think the reason is because of the focus, because of the motivation. And so those things can drastically change the lines. Drastically. Amanda Nunes, her true line against Pena looked about -1,000 in the rematch. But because of her focus, potentially, because of her game planning, because she just didn't respect Pena, she looked -110. We're talking about a change from a -110 to a -1,000. And she's talking about retirement again this time out. You know, I've heard her interviews and she's saying that she was going to retire, but she didn't want to retire because she doesn't want to leave Juliana Pena with the belt. So she came back and won the belt and now she's fighting. That's not good things to hear if you want to bet on Amanda Nunes. I'll tell you that now. But what I like in terms of bets in this spot is I like the overs a little bit because I feel like Amanda Nunes is going to play a little bit more a patient game in this spot. You know, kind of like she did against Pena. I think Aldana's very, very good boxer, and I think she keeps range well. So I think at the start, I think it's going to be kind of like a cagey affair where both fighters are not really engaging too much, which could push us into round 2 or round 3. And I do think that if there's a finish, it's probably going to come a little bit later. So I like the over 2.5. It's about -130 now. I don't mind that too much. And in terms of any other props, I'm quite surprised that Amanda Nunes sub is like +500 and then a KO is like +150, just because I think her best path to victory in this spot is clearly the grappling. So if she does go for the grappling, I think she's definitely live for a submission. I think Nunes has very good submissions. She's a very good top player, very heavy on top. And I don't think Aldana has got great grappling at all. So yeah, those are the two things I'd be looking at. Amanda sub and over 2.5 rounds. But Liam, I'm rooting for you, man. At the end of the day, I'm not going to be laying minus whatever it is on Amanda Nunes just because we can't cap that motivation and focus in. We've just got it's eerily similar to the Valentina fight, right? We've got Alexa Grasso, we've got Aldana coming up, 2 long reigning champions. Maybe we get 2 new blood Mexicans in there. Who knows? But yeah, for me, I think Amanda Nunes is going to win this fight in the later rounds. I think she gets a finish.
I love it. And the last thing I'll mention here, guys, is that I'm not saying that these are 1 for 1. I'm not saying that they're the same fighter. None of that's the case. Valentina Shevchenko is also not Amanda Nunes, right? Valentina Shevchenko made a career of winning a lot of decisions. She head kicked a couple girls too, but she's very conservative. She's an outfighter. She likes to fight over 5 rounds. No problem with any of that. Amanda Nunes, on the other hand, her cardio comes and goes in waves, right? Against Germaine de Randamie, she looked like she was underwater. By rounds 4 and 5, her wrestling looked desperate, but she had an opponent that had no answer to it at all. I think that Aldana has good enough cardio to make this a competitive fight down the stretch. She has not been finished since 2015. So I think people are, writing off her durability and her toughness. She's been in some tough spots. She hasn't given up. She said that her foot went numb in the first round against Holly Holm. You don't hear it every time she fights. She doesn't make constant excuses about it. But when she did a post-fight statement, she said, my foot went numb in round 1. I could not really move around the cage like I wanted to. So hats off to Holly. She's the better fighter tonight, but I'm going to come back better. I'm going to be stronger and a better contender from this. I think we've seen that. She went 5 rounds in a fight where she was having not a lot of success, constantly built back up to her feet, tried to compete, couldn't track down Holly Holm. That was Holly Holm's career best performance too. So God bless her. That was a great look for her. But what have we seen from Aldana since? She's continued to show that she is an aggressive fighter, that she's building on her potential. She hasn't had a million fights, 20 pro fights under her belt. I think right now is her time. She's either going to be good enough or she's not. But I think this is the best version of Irene Aldana. I think it's hard to imagine this is the best version of Amanda Nunes. She has been at the top of her game for a long time. My jiu-jitsu coach has personally witnessed her knock out men in the training room, 100%. So she is a beast. But again, that was 10 years ago, 12 years ago, 15 years ago. How long does she want to keep doing this? I think James made a great point. She's talking about WWE. She's talking about retirement. She's talking about moving on to other things. She's talking about a farm in Brazil and her second kid. That's what I'm hearing her talk about. I'm not hearing her talk about Aldana's crisp left hook and her movement in the pocket. And so maybe she just dominates her. Maybe she's overlooking her and that's going to work out well. How often does that happen in MMA? We'll wait and find out. So I think it's a compelling fight, more compelling than people are giving it credit for. We're going back to Canada for a fun fight night. And I appreciate my 2 guests that broke it down with me. I appreciate the 75 people rocking with us live in the chat as well. So drop your favorite plays below in the comment section. Excited to hear what y'all have to say. But last thing I want to do is close this out with James. Please let the people know where they can find more of your work, my brother.
Yeah, thank you very much, mate. It's been a pleasure. I know we haven't done this in a while, but I always have fun talking fights with you. Thank you to Gerhart as well. I don't think we met before, but yeah, this has been good fun. So hopefully we can all cash this weekend. if you want to find me, Lucrative MMA. I don't know why it says James Blisset here. This is my name, but it should say Lucrative MMA. So lucrativemmabetting.com is my website. I got courses on there. You can get my official picks and predictions as well on there. And my YouTube, Lucrative MMA, I put out free YouTube videos every single week. Gambling theory, breakdowns, all of that good stuff. Thanks for having me on, bro. Good luck to everyone in the chat, everyone watching. As I always say, I got this one off Narco, which is very true. We wouldn't be doing these videos without anyone in the chat, right? Because no one will be watching them. Probably we still would be talking to each other, but we wouldn't be putting out these videos time and time again. So thanks to everybody in the chat and thanks to everybody watching, even the haters, because I love you all. Shout out to everyone. Good luck on your bets this weekend. Done.
I love it. Great message. And I always say we got the sharpest chat in the game. Guys, sharp people aren't always going to agree on every fight, right? I've made a living off betting big underdogs. That means sometimes I look like a fool, right? I take big shots and sometimes it doesn't work out for me. Sometimes a person gets finished in round one, but sometimes I look like a genius. I did have Grasso on that earlier iteration, but I don't think it's biasing me because I've had a lot of other big underdogs. I've had a lot of big favorites too. It's all a matchup by matchup basis, but I appreciate you whether you agree with me or disagree with me in the chat, and thank you for your feedback on the show. Gerhart, my man, let the people know where they can find you and all the great work YBB is doing.
Yeah, man. Gerhart YBB, that is going to be my Twitter handle. I don't actually have a show on YouTube or anything. I just co-host. You guys hit me up and I'm always down to join in. But yeah, I mostly contribute the MMA for YBB. I also do, I'm an SDQL bachelor. So right now we're working on doing a database for MMA just to see, certain stats and trends for fighters. But what I will say, and go back to you, it sucks when everybody agrees on one side. Why can't we just disagree, hear each other out, and listen to certain people? For me, I entertain dogs as well. I'm okay looking like a jackass or a genius. Both are fine with me. That's the name of the game. So yeah, I hope everybody in the chat, you cash your tickets, and yeah.
I absolutely love it. So thank you very much for being here, my man. I appreciate you making the time. It's been a pleasure. And guys, the last thing that I'll close us out with today, just want to say, if you guys haven't checked it out already, now we have a podcast. You guys have been asking. It's taken me a while, but an audio-only podcast. You can find it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, search Liam Picks Fights. Please, guys, if you could get subscribed, ratings, reviews, things like that would be very beneficial for me in this early going, help people find the show that are in the podcast audience. But appreciate each and every one of you guys that make it an effort to come here and enjoy these shows. I'll be right back at you guys with content on Sunday. We got Liam's first look at the upcoming UFC Vegas card. So let's get a win on this pay-per-view week. Best of luck to all you guys on your bets. God bless you all. Enjoy those fights. And until next week, come back. We'll do it all over again. Take care, everybody.